All right, again, welcome to the NCAPPS, National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems and Traumatic Brain Injury Technical Assistance and Resource Center, Building Together, Brain Injury Survivors, Building Community, and Making a Difference webinar. Pardon me, Better Together. My name is Bevan Croft. I am a white woman in my early 40s. I'm in a brightly colored room. I have blonde hair up in a bun. And I am one of the two co-directors of NCAPPS. We're pleased to bring you all webinars each month that are free, open to the public. And as I mentioned, this month, we're bringing this webinar in coordination with the Traumatic Brain Injury Technical Assistance and Resource Center. Next page, please. For those of you who are unfamiliar with NCAPPS, we are a federally funded center that provides resources and technical assistance. And our goal is to make person-centered principles, not just an aspiration, but a reality in the lives of people who use long-term services and supports across the lifespan. Next slide, please. A few logistics to run through for you. We are working on making closed captions available to you. Hopefully, closed captioning will be available momentarily. This is a webinar format, so everyone is muted, but you are welcome to use the chat feature to communicate with the panelists and with each other. If you would like to make a comment that you'd like the whole community gathered here to see, be sure that you select everyone in the drop-down menu just before the chat box, just above the chat box, so that everyone can see your question or comment. And you can also send comments directly to the panelists or to individuals. You will be seeing a bunch of information going into chat. I recommend having chat open so that you can access the additional accessibility features for this webinar. We have slides available to you to download as a PDF, and you can access them at the link that Sashka provided in chat. This webinar is also now successfully being transcribed live within the Zoom platform in English. You can access that by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We also have live captioning available in Spanish, and the link to that can be found in chat. We will have a poll at the beginning coming up momentarily and at the end of this webinar, so please be prepared to interact with us there. Next slide, please, Sashka. We are always open to feedback, always open to communication. You can get us at ncapps@hsri.org. You can send us follow-up questions after the webinar at that address, but note that we won't be checking email during this webinar. If you need to get a hold of us then, please use chat. And this webinar is being recorded, and we will post the recording, a PDF of the slides, a plain language summary, a Spanish language transcript, and the answers to any questions that we don't get to today on our website, ncapps.acl.gov, within a few weeks. Next slide, please. So let's find out who's here today. There are over 200 folks logged on. Sashka is going to pull up a poll. And please go ahead and select all that apply as the roles that you self-identify: a person with a disability, a survivor, someone who uses services, a loved one of someone who uses services, self-advocate, advocate, peer specialist, peer mentor, social worker, counselor, care manager, researcher, analyst, service provider, organization employee, or government employee, recognizing that these are absolutely not mutually exclusive types. So we'll give folks another 5 seconds to please check your roles. Okay, and let's see who's here. Right. So we have pretty broad representation across the different roles, with the plurality being government employees. So folks who are working within state, federal, tribal, or municipal governments, but lots of representation across the other groups as well. Welcome. We're glad that you're here. We can go ahead and close that poll. And on to the next slide, please. I'm going to provide just a bit of background about why we're here and what we're talking about. This is the first of 2 webinars in October that are focused on learnings from the NCAPPS Brain Injury Learning Collaborative. This was a 1.5 year plus engagement with state teams from all over the country, where we came together to share insights. We used a modified version of the Breakthrough Series collaborative model that was pioneered by the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. It focused on principles of quality improvement, specifically the model for improvement that some of you may be familiar with, that uses PDSA, or Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles. We applied those principles to brain injury systems. Next slide, please. The overarching aim of the entire effort was how can we expand and enhance person-centered, community-based supports for people with brain injury through 4 different areas. First, and what we're going to talk about today, is how do we engage people with lived experience in self-advocacy for systems change? How do we incorporate and improve understanding what people's needs are through person-centered processes? How do we establish best practice in person-centered planning within the brain injury space? And how do we improve and expand person-centered services and supports, especially those that really support a person to live a full and meaningful life in the community? Based on those individual aims, state teams developed their own specific aims based on where they saw the most opportunity for change, and then selected specific strategies. Next slide, please. Very briefly, we had monthly coaching calls with all of the teams, and then the teams met individually without us throughout each of the months. We gathered for 4 different learning sessions in which we shared challenges, successes, built community, and then wrapped up and created storyboards. And actually, if you tune into our webinar later this month on the 20th, you'll actually be able to see 3 of the storyboards that were created by three states. This did happen in the midst of COVID, and we were able to pivot and to make the most of that situation. And I think given that we were virtual to begin with, we learned a lot, but we're able to keep going, which is a credit to everyone who's been involved in this effort. Next slide, please. All right, so just the last thing for me to say, and then I will stop talking and hand things over to the very fantastic group of survivors who will be speaking for the rest of the webinar. We really made it a priority, both for ourselves at NCAPPS and for the state teams, that lived experience perspectives be elevated and prioritized in every aspect of this process. And that meant for us hiring 3 brain injury survivors to be part of the faculty for the Brain Injury Learning Collaborative, and urging each of the state teams to recruit and invite brain injury survivors to be a part of their working groups and a part of their teams. And this webinar is really those survivors, those folks, sharing about how this went from their perspective. I will say personally, I learned so much from these folks. I was so happy and excited to be a part of this process. And I think that the challenges, the struggles, and the rewards that you're going to hear about will hopefully be instructive for you, and hopefully have you walk away inspired to prioritize and lived experience in your work, in your own work role, and see how there are a lot of opportunities to think creatively about how we really live up to the nothing about us without us mantra of the disability rights movement, which is really what this is all about. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to the group to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kelly Lang, and I wanted to start the introduction. I am a woman, middle-aged, with darkish hair. I'm wearing an electric blue blouse. We started this this teamwork together. We've been working together probably for about close to 2 years, and I've just wanted each of us to go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Kelly Lang. I'm from Virginia. I am both a survivor of brain injury and a caregiver to my daughter. We were injured in the same accident close to 20 years ago. And I've spent a lot of that time learning to be a better advocate, and this experience working with the NCAPPS team was just phenomenal and taught me so much. So next I want to introduce Carol Starr.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Starr. I am a white middle-aged woman with brownish blonde hair and wearing a pink sweater. And I have been a brain injury survivor since 1999 from a car accident. I was 32 years old at the time of my brain injury. And like so many of us, it changed my life forever. I had been a teacher and a musician, and I was not able to go back to any of those things and had to reinvent myself. It took many years to find out who the new Carol is. And I discovered that I really wanted to make a difference within this new community that I found myself within, the brain injury community. So now I do that as an author, as a speaker, and it has been such a tremendous gift to be part of the Learning Collaborative, to use what I've learned as a survivor to help make a difference for others. I think next on the list is going to be Eric.
Hello, my name is Eric Washington. I'm African American. I have some extremely large glasses on, a sleek sweater from Walmart, and I am 37 years old. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I currently reside in Missouri, where I launch all my advocacy projects. I sustained a neck injury and a spinal cord injury, as well as 2 or 3 concussions playing football throughout the years from 6 years old to 27. And now I just look forward to trying to help people and motivate people and help them focus more so on the positives instead of what they can't do. So that's me. And next is Amy.
Thanks, Eric. I'm Amy Drozer Robinson. I'm from North Dakota. I'm a white 50-year-old woman with brown hair and glasses. And I am from North Dakota. I think I already said that. My lived experience is that I'm a parent to a 12-year-old boy that was born with congenital hydrocephalus and has epilepsy. So I work a lot with many different professionals and working on the many brain surgeries that he's had and developing with some of the developmental delay specialists as well. And that's my lived experience. And it was, as Kelly said, wonderful to be a part of this team and get to know everybody. The next person on the list is Maria Martinez from Colorado.
My name is Maria Martinez. I'm from Pueblo, Colorado. I have long hair, glasses. My skin color is black. I'm Native American, and I'm a support group leader in Pueblo and an advocate. And recently lost my mom to who was a brain injury survivor and lived to be 100 years old. So I want to continue to move forward as an advocate and support group leader. And to be honest, I'm not sure who's next.
Rodney's next.
Rodney. Rodney Smith from West Virginia. Come on.
Yes, I'm Rodney Smith. I am a 65-year-old male from West Virginia. I am kind of balding with gray hair, got glasses, got a blue shirt on, and I'm a 13-year survivor of a motorcycle and truck accident that a guy pulled out in front of me and changed my life forever. Survived a traumatic brain injury, diffuse axonal and everything like that. But what I do in the state of West Virginia, I'm the chair of the TBI Waiver QIA Council and a member of the Brain Injury Advocacy or the Brain Injury Advisory Board in the state. And I got involved in this to help other people get a better outcome, not a better outcome, but a more smooth process of outcome as far as how they recover from their brain injuries and such. So I hope to do as much as I can to help people live better. Austin Wiley is next. He's from Arizona.
Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Wiley Duncan. I'm a 40-year-old white man wearing a gray cap, glasses, and a white button-down shirt. In behind me is a background of the Sonoran Desert in Arizona, where I am a medical anthropologist and postdoctoral scholar. I am also a very severe traumatic brain injury survivor from an injury that I had in Luxor, Egypt in 2003 when I was hit by a bus. And I will pass it on back to Carol and Kelly to get things started.
Wonderful, thank you. So next slide, please. So we just wanted to review what our agenda is today. So we're going to start with our storyboard. During her introduction, Bevan mentioned the storyboards, that we're going to share a little bit about what our experience was in the Brain Injury Learning Collaborative. We call this Finding Our Success, from sinking to swimming. And you're going to understand a little bit more about that very shortly. Then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion. That what we want to do is we want to take our specific experience of being part of the Learning Collaborative, and then how do we generalize that? What can all of you, as the folks who are watching this webinar, take from our experiences through the panel discussion? We hope to make that clear. Then there'll be some time for questions and answers. So where we'll begin is with our storyboard. So as the collaborative was ending and we were beginning to think about these storyboards and think about what was our experience like, particularly at the beginning of the collaborative. The first image that came to mind for many of us was we felt like we were drowning. We felt like we were, there was so much information coming at us, so many emails, so many people to meet, so much new information that was a theme that worked for us. And that over time, as we learned more, as we came together as a group, it felt like we were coming up for air. And then eventually we learned to swim. So that's the theme that we used for our storyboard. And as we go through, we're going to go through each stage and talk about, well, how do we get from feeling like we were drowning, like wondering, can we do this? Do we belong here? To feeling like at the end that, yes, this is indeed a project that we do belong at. So Kelly is going to talk now about how we kind of brainstorm some words to go along with some of these images that we're going to show you.
Thanks, Carol. So this group, for the most part, met for the past 2 years. We had a monthly support group where we supported each other outside of our team and faculty meetings. And when we started to think about the storyboards, we decided to just have a meeting where we just threw out all the feelings and thoughts we had at the beginning of the collaborative. So right at the beginning when we all first started. And after we came up with all our words, we then developed a survey and we decided which words meant the most to everyone, and we kind of ranked them. And as you can see, there's a lot. And the words that are out more in bold are the ones that really resonated with every single one of us. And so those were the basis for this, the drowning portion, the beginning part of the collaborative. And I think Carol's going to now describe the next slide.
Yes, so if you go to the next slide. So this is a slide that shows some of those words. On that word cloud, it's a little hard to read some of those words. These were some of the feelings that we had as the collaborative began. When we felt like we were drowning, like that was this too much? And so Austin and Amy are going to talk in more detail about, we can't talk about all of these words, but we can talk about a few of them. So if we can have the next slide, and Austin is now going to talk about 3 in specific.
Thanks, Carol. This is Austin. So when things first started, I know the feeling that I experienced and most of the other members on this panel also experienced was, where do I fit in? What's my purpose? What am I doing here? Both because TBI related impairments, we didn't know exactly what our purpose was, but also because how do we fit in with the rest of this team where individuals are not themselves survivors? What is our specific role to the team? Now, on top of that, because we all experienced this, we were also receiving hundreds of emails. It was incredibly overwhelming through the system that we use called Basecamp, which sent out emails every time someone updated from one of their teams, updated something on their profile. In other words, we were wondering what we were doing there. And then we felt like we didn't know what was going on. And there was so much happening around us. And it was impossible for us with our brain injury related impairments and senses of organization and executive functioning to know exactly what we were supposed to be doing. It was very concerning and also confusing. And so I know that was a situation a lot of us, and this would be true for a lot of brain injury survivors as part of teams around the nation, will feel at the beginning. And in order to think about that, we also considered some things that Amy is going to share.
Hello. So when I began this portion of the collaboration, I had very mixed emotions. Definitely had that sinking, drowning feeling, but also there was some excitement in being involved in such an important project and such a much needed project to better serve people. I also, at the same time, was feeling that overwhelm, thinking, what have I got myself into? Do I have the right abilities? Do I have the right amount of time? Just lots of emotions. As Austin said, there was many emails, and I think sometimes that adds to the overwhelm more than almost anything else. In addition to the emails, there was many acronyms. So just trying to become familiar with some of what the acronyms were, use them in a manner that was functional for making progress, and just getting to know everybody. So again, that was wonderful to get to know everybody, but definitely mixed emotions as we were getting into the beginning parts of the project here. And I think, I can't remember who I'm going back to, but I'm sure that that person knows.
Hi, it's Kelly. Yeah, so as you know, as with when you're learning to swim, you feel like you're not going to be able to do it, and then you start to come up for air. And that's how we all feel that was once we got past the initial stages of the overwhelm and the, what have I gotten myself into phase. We started to feel like, oh, I can finally take a breath. I'm finally figuring this all out. So we came up with some more words to describe, and you can go to the next slide, please. And these are the words that kind of stuck out for all of us, what it felt like when we were coming up for air. We developed this support network for ourselves so we could talk about things with each other, because we could understand what each of us was going through, because we were all dealing with our injuries and how it affects us when working on a project such as this. So again, the bold words are the ones that meant the most, and really helped describe for each of us what it felt like to come up for air. And you can go to the next slide. And then these are all the words that were listed in the previous one, where you can see them a little bit better. And I think Carol is going to start talking about the monthly survivor group and others that meant the most to her personally.
And next slide, please. So early on in the collaborative, there was the first learning session, which it was like 3 or 4 or 5 hours. It was many hours long. They had breaks, but still, as a brain injury survivor, it was really, really long. It was really hard to make it through the entire thing. I was on the couch for days afterwards and felt very overwhelmed. And that's when I was thinking, I was really surprised by that, because I mean, I am more than 20 years post-injury. And I thought, well, geez, if I am struggling with this, then I bet that other survivors on teams are also struggling. So I know that when I'm struggling as a brain injury survivor, the people that I want most are other brain injury survivors, other people who get this, who are also experiencing the same thing. So as faculty members, Kelly, Eric, and I talked together and decided that, you know what, we asked if we could do this, let's form a group within the collaborative. So we created the survivor group, which we met monthly, and it was an opportunity to talk about the issues that we had as brain injury survivors within the larger collaborative, of what it meant to be on a team with people who didn't have brain injuries, any issues that were coming up. How do we know what to focus on, what not to focus on? And in the process of doing that, it was an opportunity to mentor one another, because if one person was having an issue, then invariably somebody else had run across that, we could give each other feedback about what had worked for us. It was also an opportunity to see each other's journey in our own, to know that our struggles were not just ours, because as brain injury survivors, it can be so isolating sometimes when you feel like you're struggling, and if nobody knows that you're struggling, that when you have this group that you can talk to, and you know that others see that too, that others are experiencing the same thing, that it was a place where we could share those things and know that we weren't alone in this experience. And it helped to move us from that feeling of drowning to coming up for air. So Maria is going to talk now about some more things that we did that helped us come up for air.
So I'm looking at these panels here, learning to let go of what was too much to cope with. I think the main thing was because I was part of the brain injury advisory board in Colorado, it gave me an initial type of idea of what may be occurring with the collaboration. If it was helpful to focus on tasks that I agreed to participate in, and it was helpful to understand that if I chose those areas, then I could probably manage them a lot better. If I ran into issues with how to cope with them, then I would ask for assistance through the group or through other survivors or individuals that were part of the collaborative. Picking my battles was understanding what my own battle was, what was overwhelming for me, what was necessary for me to be able to stay and maintain a connection with the people, and understanding how I can focus on person-centered practices for myself during this process. Speaking up for more for our needs. I think that's the we had to understand, or at least for myself, understanding that each of us was advocating for our needs. If there was, I think if we advocate for ourselves, it releases a lot of the unnecessary stress that we tend to pick up. And then on the outside of that, I was connecting with other people outside the collaboration, and that would allow me to share what I was going through with the collaboration. So I think in that sense, it was always important to self-advocate for what I was trying to do with the collaboration. And I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly.
I think actually to me.
Okay,
So I'm just going to introduce the swimming portion. So, but by the end of the collaborative, as a group, we felt like we'd learned to swim, that we had learned how to work within this structure to get things done as survivors, to work with our injuries, to work with our teams. So we again brainstormed words that, well, how did we get to this swimming phase? What were some of the things that happened? So we could go to the next slide. That's our word cloud. Again, as Kelly has said on some of these, that the bigger things are the things we felt more strongly about, such as speaking more and having new skills and believing in ourselves. So now Rodney and Kelly are going to be talking more. I'm sorry, one more slide first. Here's the boxes, which list all of those words that we brainstormed for the swimming section of this. And now Kelly and Rodney are going to be talking more about some of those. So Rodney's up next.
Yeah, this is Rodney from West Virginia. I'm decided just after we got over the overwhelming part of the process and everything, I decided to get really involved as much as I could with the group, started speaking more and voicing my opinion more. And we actually, at one point, they decided they were going to do some training for the caregivers for people on the TBI waiver program. So they did an interview with me about my experience. When I went through rehab at Shepherd Center in Atlanta. It took me 2.5 months to get from point A to Shepherd Center. And that's actually when recovery started, when I got to a place that knew exactly how to do rehab. So I shared with them the person-centered practices that they use at Shepherd Center that make life so much easier for a survivor of a brain injury. So we put that together on an interview, and they used that to train, went through at least 4 training sessions with case managers and such things as that for brain injury survivors. So I feel like I've contributed pretty well with that. And in the process, I got to know my team very well and got a lot of support from those that were on the team. We shared information and they actually listened to me. So that was very, made me feel like I was really making a difference. Kelly?
Thanks, Rodney. So I think the big thing for me was I'd spent most of my advocating career, if you want to call it that, advocating for my daughter. And I neglected myself in the process. And I learned that, before I never really talked about my own injury. And I realized that I needed to talk about it because I needed to set a good example for her. And in doing so, I learned these new skills and how to become a better advocate and to speak up and to say what I need, and to get that self-confidence that I can, what I need and what I want matters. And, I should say what I need. I might not always get what I need, but I should at least say and try to get it and try to get these accommodations. It also taught me how to be a better advocate about which things were worth advocating for and which things I would just let go. Because that is also part of the recovery is you have to, like Maria said before, you just have to learn which things to focus on. And it's also helped me to increase my advocacy at different levels. I became a member of the Virginia Brain Injury Advisory Council. I had been in was on the board of the Brain Injury Association of Virginia. So I've been taking these steps into other groups, into other avenues to increase that advocacy about for people to learn more about brain injury, how a family, because that's a big component for me, is how an entire family is affected. It's not just the individual, it affects the whole family. And that it's just been a great experience for me. And I think Carol's going to introduce our next section.
Yes. So from all of this experience comes some lessons that it's time now to, as we reflect on this experience that we've had. So what kind of advice do we have for brain injury survivors, for program organizers, for the folks who are running committees and running projects? And we really wanted to spend a little bit of time and talk about what we've learned and what we think that others can benefit from, that completely outside of the collaborative, kind of generalizing our experience. So we just wanted to spend a little time to share some of our learnings. So Amy's going to talk about the first learning.
So with any new learning experience, there is lots of overwhelm involved. So one of the key lessons, takeaways, was don't be surprised about that overwhelming feeling. And especially at the start of any new learning or any new project, just remember to stay strong and don't give up. And one way that we talked about doing that is taking those baby steps, taking small steps, remembering to rest as you needed, and honor yourself with the knowledge that this too shall pass, given you're not going to be overwhelmed the whole time. It's new. And I think Maria is next.
My name is Maria. So we're looking at know when you need to reach out for help, advocate for yourself early and often. I came from a family of disabilities. My mom was blind and had a stroke, and my dad had muscular dystrophy, and then myself with a stroke and a brain injury from a motorcycle accident. And I think we have to look at our past and understand that I think we're advocates, and we need to fine tune that. And I think that's how we understand how to reach out. If I'm not clear about something and I need clarification, then I ask people. I asked people that were on this monthly group that we met, Kelly or Eric or whoever was on, and it helped me to understand more and more what I needed to work on, or perhaps what my strengths were and what perhaps my weaknesses. So our voice is so important, and I think that's something that we shouldn't shy away from. And I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Maria. For me, as all of you have heard a million times probably, is that if you've seen one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury. No two are alike. It's also true that none of our recoveries have been alike. We all have different deficits after injury. We all have different strengths that we develop. And just connecting with other survivors and learning, they might have a technique that I could use, a compensation strategy, or how to do something different that I hadn't even thought about. And that community, I feel, is key, of just learning that you're not alone, that you have support if you need it. It's hugely satisfying to be able to support someone else through their journey, especially, and knowing that, you can be that mentor, you can be that peer that they come to with, when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they're feeling like they're not making a difference, and, you can do more together rather than trying to do it alone and getting frustrated. So one of the things that was really important to me was the sense of community, which I think this group in particular really was able to do. And hopefully we'll be able to continue it as we go on. So next, I'm going to introduce the next slide. So as we were talking about all this, we came up with tips for survivors, but we also have tips for project organizers of how things can be done a little differently, or just to be more aware whenever you're working with a person with lived experience, a family member who's working on your projects, because you definitely need their input, but things might have to be a little, skewed a little differently for them. And so these are just some things to start thinking about. And Carol's going to start off with the first one.
Our first tip was realizing that survivors might be more overwhelmed than you realize, that there is a big difference between, in a group, what's a professional pace and what the survivor pace might be. And when there are like a lot of emails going on, where there's a lot of information, that it might not take much to overwhelm us, especially if we've been out of that game for quite a long time. And I found that there was a difference, like, because I've been at the brain injury gig for more than 20 years. When I get overwhelmed, my instinct now is, okay, I want to do something about it. When I was 3, 4, 5 years about it, it was just back up and disappear because it was too much. And so I think knowing where folks are in their journey, because it might impact, if they're very overwhelmed, they might just come to a meeting and then never come back because it's too much. So realizing that they may not even tell you that they're overwhelmed. They may just not come back. So I think recognizing that is an important piece of involving people with lived experiences in projects. So Austin is next.
Okay, so this is advice that is good for everyone, but especially for project organizers. Now, yes, survivors do need to learn how to explain their needs, but it's not all on the survivor. So in your role as a project organizer, you need to ask what the survivor's experience in the project is like. And this is the important part. Don't just ask, listen to what they say. It might not meet with your expectations. Remember, they have more personal experience with this than you do. So ask and listen to what they are telling you about their needs and their experiences in the project. And for our final point, let me turn it over to Rodney.
It would help to unmute. I'm Rodney. One of the ways that you can get survivors involved is give them multiple options of ways to do things within a collaborative like this, or any kind of program that you want us to participate in. We can offer us ways like being a part of a work group, or part of a small projects on the side, or doing little things like research and things like that to provide information. And of course, ask us questions about our experience in the years that we've been, like you said, every injury is so much different. So you're going to get a different set of experiences from everyone that you ask about this. So, get us involved and get us involved in multiple things. And then you want to check in regularly with the survivor that you got involved, make sure that they're doing the best they can, and make sure that they're not overwhelmed. And if they seem to be overwhelmed, or seem like they're losing interest, or if it seems like that we're not feeling like we're a part of something, you need to change directions and make a little bit of change as far as a way to adjust, so that we do feel like we're part of doing something, and that we do feel like we are really contributing. So you've got to be flexible as a professional working with a brain injury survivor, because we all have different levels of abilities and different ways of interpreting things. So patience with us, ask us questions, and like Austin said, listen to what we say, and apply what you see that we know works for us. Kelly? Or Carol? Carol.
Right. It is time for a short break. We're just going to take 5 minutes to give everybody time to get some water, stretch your legs. So take a little bit of a break, and we're going to come back at 3:51 Eastern time. We will see you shortly.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back from our break. I hope you all were able to get something to drink and otherwise. So now we're going to stop the screen sharing, and we are going to go into a panel discussion, which is going to be moderated by Eric Washington, who was also one of the brain injury faculty members on the NCAPPS project. So Eric, I'll let you take it away.
Hello, everyone. We have a great, panel. Everyone's amazing at what they do. I'm just I'm happy that I can actually be here to listen to them speak, because I enjoy listening to all of them. So our first question, we're gonna have multiple questions directed at, a couple people, 2 people will answer, and then we'll just go forward from there. So the first question is to Amy and Carol. Was there any point in time where you felt like you wanted to quit? And when you felt overwhelmed, why didn't you give up? Carol, you can go first.
Sure. There was no time when I wanted to quit, but I definitely felt overwhelmed at the very beginning and wondered, what am I doing here? Am I going to be able to do this? And one of the reasons why I didn't give up was this feeling of, I really liked being part of something that is bigger than me, that I'm part of a project where I can make a difference. And also knowing that in the past, when I've gotten overwhelmed, it does get better. So I think somebody had mentioned that as part of one of our things, that yes, oftentimes things do start out as very challenging, but with strategies, with help, with time, that I can make things better. And that if I quit, early on, then I don't get the opportunity to find a way to make things work. How about for you, Amy?
Similar, except for I did want to quit initially, but I also came around as I got to know more people within the group and listening to everybody's stories and learning and making some of those connections as far as helping to provide resources and share resources really made a huge difference in my life over the last year and a half of being part of this. So I think those monthly meetings were really meaningful and helpful. And so those are reasons that I did not give up, even though it felt like it at times.
Okay, Amy, I'm glad you didn't quit. And Carol, you're doing an amazing job. So the next question is devoted to everyone, so everyone gets a chance. There are many ways a person can feel otherness, including culturally, racial, gender, sexuality, language, geographically, disability, and age. How did any of these impact your participation, and how did you feel about the project in general? I'll go with the people on my screen, how I see it in order. So Carol, you're first.
Oh, lucky me, I get to go first again. And for me, I'm answering that question around disability. And what surprised me at the beginning was that how it impacted me that going to these meetings and seeing all these a lot of women who are roughly the same age as me, and I lost my career when I was 32 years old, and seeing how far other people had gotten in their careers who didn't have brain injuries, and it brought back some of the brain injury grief, and it did give me that feeling of otherness, that feeling of what could have been in my life had I not had a brain injury, how far my career could it have gone. I mean, I am still enormously proud of everything that I have accomplished since my brain injury, and it didn't take away any of those feelings, but it did bring forth some of those what if kinds of feelings, that feeling a little bit less than because I had a disability. And I'm not saying that anybody said anything at all that led me to feel that way. This was all an internal feelings that I had as part of a group. I think it's one example of some of those hidden feelings that you just never know that somebody might be having when they're in a group.
Okay, it seems like you guys are just bouncing around on my screen, so we'll just go with who just went to the left, Miss Kelly Lang.
Do we just make it challenging for you there, Eric?
Exactly.
I was getting a headache from watching everyone move around. I have to piggyback on part of what Carol said, and that is that I agree that we sat in those faculty meetings, and with the exception of a couple people, one being Eric, it was mostly females and very accomplished females at that. And my plan had always been to return to work once my children were in school full time, and that all changed very suddenly for me in 2001. I had a severely injured daughter I had to take care of, and I had to take care of myself in some respect. But my other thing that I noticed was I had wished that there was a little bit more diversity on some of the teams, especially some of the teams that really could have used some of that diversity in their talking about what they were doing for their own states, because those are their constituents. So I would have liked to see that a little bit more and heard a little bit more from the other survivors in those states. When Carol and I started and Eric started the support group, we reached out to all the survivors, and we're really hoping that we would get all those representation, and we didn't. So that was a shame.
Okay. I like that answer. So, Miss Maria Martinez.
It's a big question, it covers a lot. So as a woman of color and being a woman that is Indigenous and lives in a rural setting and age, I'm 66, and I think it affected me quite a bit. I think it impacted me. I wish the states had more representation, and so that we could have more engagement of what's going on in those states, because I think it's very important that becomes something that other people can hear and hopefully want to participate in. But I also think that part of the project was that it was a challenge, and that challenge was a good challenge because it allowed me to advocate for the things that I advocate for so much here in Pueblo, being a rural setting, being a person of color, people that have difficulty finding jobs, finding apartments and things like that. So yes, it was a very beneficial project for me. Thanks, Eric.
No, thank you. All right, Miss Amy.
I think the rural piece, just being in I'm in very rural Minnesota. Actually, I'm right on the border here. So that was my piece. Again, we didn't have a ton of diversity. We do have some Indigenous people on the team to start with, but I would have, like Kelly said, like to have seen a little bit more diversity. But again, we're in rural North Dakota, Minnesota. So that was one piece of it, but it was good to get to I don't know, just to delve into this question a little bit further too. So thank you for including everybody in the answer.
Okay, Mr. Austin.
Yeah, I'm I think the only one on the call, aside from Eric, who I had my injury at age 22. I was 8 months out of undergrad education at the time, and I can say that I'm used to feeling, I'd never had a real strong sense of myself as a competent adult when I had my injury. And then all of a sudden to be knocked back to what was a very infantilizing experience of being stuck at home and unable to walk and taken care of every moment of the day was difficult. And so when I meet other people who see me being high functioning and able to get a PhD and be an academic, they don't understand that I have this experience. And so they automatically treat me like someone who's a brain injury survivor, but not quite, and maybe coming up with excuses or what's the word, malingering for when I have problems that are brain injury related. And so they automatically cast me, because of when I had my injury, as some sort of a deceitful somebody who's trying to game the system. And that can be very upsetting. Also difficult to deal with. At the same time, as I recognize that everyone else, especially those who are not white and male, have very different experiences than mine, and that most people don't seem to understand the ways that all of these factors, age, geography, language, sexuality, gender, race, culture, can interact with what TBI means in each of our cases. So I will turn it back over to Eric.
Great answer. Great answer. And last but not least, Mr. Rodney.
Yeah, this is Rodney. In our state, West Virginia, there's not that much diversity unless you play football or something like that. So it wasn't very much of an issue. The ruralness is definitely an issue with us because I'm in a very much rural community. So dealing with all of the Zoom meetings, we didn't have any face-to-face meetings during any of this time. So having to do everything over Zoom and stuff was kind of overwhelming at times. But what I enjoyed is most about this collaborative was hearing from people like Eric and Maria about the diversity issues and the different perspectives. I'm always interested in hearing these things. I mean, I did 30 years, 24 years in the Army. So I was around a lot of racial, different types of races and such things as that. But as far as living where I live, I kind of been away from it for a while. So it was great and refreshing to hear the different things that you guys deal with and understanding that it's not the same for everybody. So, and I hope to help those around here that may have those kind of issues. And I might even tag you and Eric or Maria for help at some point. Eric?
That meant a lot. And Austin, you are you're probably the second smartest person I know besides myself, but just joking. But actually that means a lot from, both of you guys. And that, trust me, the world would be a better place if we all thought like that. So now the next question is to both guys. Who did you guys rely on, and who was your biggest allies in these groups?
Rodney, do you want to go first?
Yeah, we'll go with Rodney first.
Okay. Yeah. My team was very supportive, especially the team lead, Barbara Recknagel. She got me involved in everything she could get me involved in. Some of the things that I didn't fully understand, but gave everything I could with it. So it made me feel very much a part of something. And this group of survivors gave us something to lean on, when we were overwhelmed and such things. So it helped me a lot, and it gave us, a place to compare notes and a place to vent, especially early on, didn't it, Eric?
Yes. Man, you're funny. All right, Mr. Austin.
Okay, so my experience is very common with brain injury survivors and was a bit different from Rodney's. As if you've seen one TBI, you've seen one TBI. I didn't have anyone to rely on in this project until later. So at the beginning, when I was feeling overwhelmed and confused and not sure what my role is, I didn't have anyone that understood me or that spoke to me on a regular basis. And it wasn't until I found Carol, Kelly, Eric, and the rest of the group that I was able to start to gain my sense of self within this program and actually do what I had initially intended to do when I started. And it's thanks to them that I am still here. And that's important for everyone to realize, that as program managers or leaders, you need to help survivors who don't have anyone to rely on, because that's the case for a lot of us, to find a sense of community and people that they can talk to and rely on when they're feeling overwhelmed or troubled or bothered or something like that.
Okay. Two great answers from two great men. All right, now on to the next question. Were there any disappointments or things that you feel like didn't go well, or things that you would change or do differently? This question is for Kelly and Maria. So we'll start with Kelly first.
I'm going to jump on what Austin said. And one of my biggest disappointments would be that for any survivor to feel that they didn't have anyone to lean on, or they felt lost or alone. I would never want anyone to feel that way. So I'm glad, Austin, that you came and that you took our support, and because you were valuable, extremely valuable member of this team. And so I guess that's my biggest disappointment, is if anyone else felt that way and just didn't stick to it like Austin did, that they felt alone in this process, because everyone knows that a brain injury is very lonely. It keeps you away from others. You feel that otherness, and that's always been one of my goals, is to make sure that other people feel included, that they feel part of the team, they feel part of a group, no matter what type of group or team it is. I just feel that we're all in this together, and we have to support one another.
Okay, Maria.
Maria, you're on mute.
I like that muteness. But I think what I was saying, it was that I think the disappointment would be when the voices aren't heard, and but I think towards the end, I think the voices got louder, and I think ears were popping. So I think that's a good thing. And would I change anything? I think it's just taking a risk to share what you feel. Be as authentic as you can, and put it on the table, and just roll with it. You got to take a risk, and I think that's part of this collaborative, was we took a risk, and I'm very proud that we did. And would I change anything differently? I think just being able to participate and interact and be more open with everybody from all states, because I think I learned so much from every state that it made me want to stay even longer. And I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you. So the next question is, how did you organize yourself, your time through this entire project? First, we're going to go with Ms. Amy.
There's a certain amount of irony in me answering a question about being organized, but that said, I really leaned on the email information from MISO, sent out a lot of, or the NCAPPS organization sent out a lot of information and reminders. So that was good. And then I often connected with other team members from the lived experience teams if I had questions, and was easily redirected as needed. Rodney was gonna comment too, I believe.
Yeah, this is Rodney. My basically was just like compensatory strategies that I've learned, but just Google Calendar and sticky notes all over the place, all over the fridge, all over my computer and things like that. Here's my calendar. It's got, you can't really see it, can you? It's got every day has something in it, about 3 or 4 different notes for every day in my Google Calendar. So it's dinging and dinging all the time to remind me that, hey, I got a meeting coming up. I need to study for the next meeting. I need to read these emails and such things. So just old-fashioned compensatory strategies. Eric?
I must admit, Rodney, you have the most impressive bookshelf behind you. I really like that organization. I really think that's pretty impressive. So that's organization 101 right there. So now the question is for everyone. What do you think makes survivors hesitant to participate in projects like this? So once again, we'll go from left to right. Please don't move anymore. Miss Kelly Lane.
What makes people hesitant is they're not really sure what their role is going to be. And if they do have a voice, they're not sure it's going to be heard. So I think that's the number one reason a lot of people with lived experience will not participate or are hesitant to participate. And I think some of that also comes back to their history of maybe jumping in too early and participating in groups and then having it not work out. And then they're afraid to get involved again. So, but I would love to see everyone get involved in whatever way they feel most comfortable.
Okay, Miss Carol.
I think one reason that folks have a hard time participating is that fear of being the token survivor, of being alone in a group where nobody understands their issues and having to constantly advocate for themselves, that it gets tiring after a while. I mean, I get that is something that we have to do as survivors, but this project where there were 3 of us on the faculty with brain injuries, I mean, that was like a revelation to me. That was the first time that I've been like on a committee where I'm like, I'm not the only one. That we had a team that we could figure things out together, and what a difference that made. And I think that when folks don't have that, then it's easy to feel that otherness, to feel that isolation. So I think that's one reason why folks hesitate to participate in projects.
All right, Miss Maria.
Well, Maria here. Maybe it's not even knowing how to be invited, or how to participate, or who you're connected to, in the community. Because you just don't just join NCAPPS and just say, hey, I'm here. It's there's a method, and I think a lot of people are left out of that method, and hopefully it'll filter out so there's more people involved. I think the other part is what is the mission? Do they want to be part of that mission of what's being shared? And is it going to impact their communities and where they come from? And I think that's really important. I'll take it back to you, Eric.
Okay, Miss Amy.
I think sometimes it goes back to that overwhelm piece, and just having another thing to learn sometimes is enough to make people hesitant about joining, even though the benefit might be great. Luckily, all these wonderful people continue to join despite any thoughts to that effect. So.
Wow, short but sweet, huh? Okay, well, wasn't expecting that one. Mr. Austin.
Piggybacking on what Kelly said earlier, I think a lot of it goes back to survivors' personal history. And so this is a comment for everyone on the call. Every time you treat a survivor in a way that is discriminatory or doesn't respond to their needs or interests, you build up that resistance in them to being part of projects in the future. And so because of their personal history with things that didn't work out, or where they didn't feel like they were included or welcomed, that makes them more hesitant to participate in projects like this great NCAPPS project in the future. So everyone in disability studies principles of universal design, just treat everyone with more of that sense of understanding and acceptance, even if you don't know if they had a brain injury, because there's so many of us that you actually might have had a brain injury at some point.
All right, last but not least, Mr. Rodney.
This is Rodney. Yeah. Basically, through this whole process of recovery from the brain injury, so things, everything you do is another process, and you got to start from square one in that process and spin all the way up. When you join something like this that looked like a pretty overwhelming project, it makes you think, man, I got a lot of acronyms to learn. I got to learn new people. Do I really want to do this? And then you think, well, you make more difference than you think you do. So let's dive in and see what we can do. That's about it, Eric.
All right, perfect. I want to thank everyone for listening to this session of TBI Celebrity Squares, because it looks like squares on my screen. And now we're in the question and answer session with, I believe, Bevan.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey, thanks. Thank you, Eric. And everyone. And I just want to just acknowledge, I said it in chat, just Maria a few minutes ago talked about authenticity and about being authentic. And I just want to honor and thank everyone's authenticity, both what you are sharing here, our panelists, but also what folks are sharing in chat. This is really what this stuff is all about. So thank you. We've gotten some excellent questions, so I'm going to dive right in. The first question I have, and anyone who'd like to speak up, please do, is, did you find that the culture of the teams that you were on, and thinking particularly about people without brain injuries, did that culture of the teams change as you advocated for yourselves?
I think mine did. This is Rodney. I think mine did. The more I contributed, the more they listened, and the more that I felt involved in the project. So it did change in a positive way as we went along in the thing.
Anyone else want to reflect on how the culture of your team changed?
I'll say something, Bevan. I believe that I think that it would naturally have to change, just because I think what happened is that we speak a lot about in the NCAPPS group about person-centered, and meeting people where they are and representing the entire community. And I think once anyone with the brain injury starts stepping up and advocating for themselves, I think people will just naturally just say, okay, let's see what you got. I do belong here. So I think it naturally would happen. And if it didn't, I just don't think that those people should be a part of the group anymore.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I've seen it change too. I think that's a good thing, though. I think when there's movement and it revolves, I think it brings in just a lot more engagement with people being able to share their voices. So I think it's really important to see a change. If it stays stagnant, I think it's not beneficial.
Thanks, Maria. And I'll add, I know I'm not a panelist, but I will add, this is Bevan, that our culture changed. The NCAPPS team, Alex, Connor, Miso, and I, our group changed from working with you all, and particularly with Carol, Kelly, and Eric. Otherwise,
Combination, Carrick. That's our new name now, Carrick.
We had never
That's
worked.
gonna stick.
Yeah. We'd never worked with brain injury survivors before we met you. And I learned so much, and we do things quite differently. And Maria, like you said, it is all for the better. Yeah. All right. We've gotten a whole bunch of questions around discrimination. And Austin, a while ago, you talked about your own experience of, being accused of malingering, which is a good word to know. And it really means feigning or exaggerating illness or disability. And we got a lot of comments in chat, 4 or 5 commenters sharing their own experiences of being accused of malingering. And I think for any invisible disability, this is something we really need to think about. So I would love to hear from each of you or anyone who's experienced this, any reflections you have, and any takeaways for what that means for working with survivors.
I can start if that's all right, since you referenced me in that comment. So one of the things that I experience in my team, professional teams, who always know that I have a brain injury, I do tend to lead with that because I found that makes things easier moving forward, is that oftentimes when something comes up, something new comes up, and it causes me to have some sort of reaction, whether it be impairment based or even not, and I try and explain how that changes things in terms of my brain injury, they will say, oh, well, but you said, X, and now you're saying Y. And so referencing back to my point, you need to ask and listen to what the survivor is telling you. Brain injury impairments do change depending on how the person is feeling, what their social circumstances are, things like that. And also, brain injury is not something that's just one thing. So every time something new comes up, they need to tell you about it, or you need to ask them about it, because it might very well be brain injury related. And just because you heard what they said the first time doesn't mean that you're going to know what they're going to say the second time. So you need to always be ready to adapt and shift depending on what they are telling you their brain injury experiences are.
Thanks, Austin. Do others have thoughts on this topic?
Bevan, can you repeat it again, please?
Yeah, the question is, generally, well, it's a two-part question. The first is, I want anyone who can to reflect on this idea about malingering and the experience of malingering, exaggerating or feigning your brain injury or being accused of that, and how it feels, and what we need to know to be sensitive to that. The larger question is about discrimination, being discriminated against for having a brain injury. Any other reflections on that?
So I want to touch bases on it a little bit. I think one of the harshest is when a mental health worker tells an individual that they're malingering and they have a tumor, or they're fighting to find resources that will allow them to receive SSI or what have you, Social Security disability. And so when a professional, and you're depending on them to evaluate you, and they evaluate you as the person that does that, I think that's harmful in anybody's recovery. The other part of the question about discrimination is that I think when there is a speech impairment and people are not able to speak clearly, then there's a lot of questioning about how we are interpreting things. It always seems to come back to our mental health, instead of identifying it as an impairment from the brain injury. So I think that's something that's really bothersome to me. And I don't just see it with, I see it with people that are in our community, and that's very, very frustrating to work with.
Thank you for bringing that up. And we saw from the poll at the beginning, there are a lot of professionals here, and so I hope that folks heard that loud and clear. It's harmful to accuse people of malingering and damaging. Thank you. I just want to highlight one quote came out of chat. Jan said, "It's simple and free to be generous and kind." What a wonderful alternative to accusing people of malingering or discriminating against them. I have another question for you all. Did you organize yourselves as a survivor group and coordinate and facilitate your own meetings, or did you ask a mentor to help organize or facilitate and coordinate your meetings? And so I'd love for you guys to share a little more, both about how you did that during the Learning Collaborative, and then also this webinar. How did it come together?
I can start with that one. So for the survivor group, each month, Kelly, Eric, and I would do a Zoom call, and we would talk about what would we like to talk about for the next month's survivor call. So this was a completely survivor run driven group and we based our topics on what was going on, in the collaborative, what we had just talked about in the coaching calls or in the faculty calls. We based it on our own experiences in groups, what we knew about some of the issues that we had dealt with as being survivors on teams. And we did a lot of fish bowls where we talked about issues and the rest of the group watched. And then we talked about what we learned from those sorts of things. This webinar was survivor run, that we came up with our points. We worked together to figure out what our theme was. We brainstormed our topics. Kelly was our poll master. We did a lot of polls with figuring out, well, which were our most important points. And we took our time with it, that as survivors, we don't move at a professional pace. So this webinar did not come together like over the last couple of days. We've been working at this over the last several months. And that I think that's an important point about anything done survivor wise, that we can't do things at a professional pace. We have to do things at our own pace. We can do really very well done sorts of things, but not at anybody's pace but our own. We have to take it one step at a time.
Thanks,
Kelly and Eric, if you want to jump in there.
I would just say that the only support we ever got was just using the Zoom link from NCAPPS, which MISO had set up for us. That was pretty much it. Like Carol said, Eric, Carol, and I would meet and kind of figure out, well, let's try and talk about this. And sometimes the group would go in a different direction, which was fine. But this was a group of people who were very respectful of one another. And I think we all felt like we were heard.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree.
I just want to add and highlight even the survivor group, the whole concept, talk about culture change of our team. That wasn't built into the learning collaborative format. That's something that we added because Carol, Kelly, Eric, Carrick insisted. So again, this was like start to finish, all of this is them.
And that came basically because we got overwhelmed after the first learning session. So I think it's a lesson in that when we get overwhelmed, good things can come out of that, because then that's when our own advocacy roles kicked in. All right, we're overwhelmed. Now's a time when we need to advocate. And that's what we did. And all the credit to NCAPPS for listening to us and for saying, okay, how do we help make this better?
I would add, because Bevan, I wanted to add this before, but I've told so many people this, that I was so impressed with NCAPPS that when we came to you and told you things, you and Alex and Nisa and Connor, you listened, and I knew you listened because you made changes. And so you didn't just listen by going, you actually changed things and you made it happen. So I can't tell you how grateful I think all of us are for that.
We're grateful for you. This is a partnership. We have hit the end. We could keep going. We could do another webinar on each of these questions that folks asked. There are questions that we didn't get to. We will get to them in writing, and I will make sure that all of the questions get back to the panel and you all can respond back, because I know you have more to say. So stay tuned on resources. If you could, before you go, please fill out the poll that's coming up. There's 7 questions. We want to hear how this webinar went for you. We take your feedback very seriously, and we are a learning organization. So your answers to these 7 questions will help us to improve future webinars. From the bottom of my heart, from Alex, Miso, Connor, Sashka, Terry, from NCAPPS and the TBI Traumatic Brain Injury Technical Assistance and Resource Center. Thank you for your partnership, for your advocacy, for all that you do. And thanks to everybody for listening in. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you. Had a good time.
Thanks and goodbye.